Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sasha Star, and it's Ukrainian show on Pod TV. And our guests today are Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
We are. Oh,
Hello, and
glad to be here.
congratulations on your book.
Oh, it's been out. It's been out there a while, and
What's- well,
it's
I
been out there
just
a while. But now
but it's
they're just
available
now
on
putting.
Amazon.
Yes, it is.
Okay, and we have Ivan Kucherenko from Kiev. Welcome to the show, Ivan.
Hello, Sasha. Hi, Jonathan. Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
Hi. Well, there were very tragic developments from Russian side inflicted on Ukraine, and I'm very upset that it happened just next day after a telephone call between Zelensky and Emperor Xi. Ivan, what's your opinion? Why Russians did that?
The reason is quite simple. Russia actually is a terrorist state, a bandit, which trying to show that it's still powerful and it still can do some very bad things, and that Ukraine has to start negotiations about possible peace with Russia. But the problem is that they're just a terrorist. When Al Qaeda struck United States on 11th of September, nobody in the world said that United States have to sit under any negotiations with Al Qaeda, and President Bush have to shake a hand to Osama bin Laden. And unfortunately, when terroristic country Russia strikes peaceful Ukrainian houses, some politicians, like President of Brazil, are saying that Ukraine has to talk about some peaceful negotiations with Putin, which is just impossible after such actions. And Russia, at least, and the whole civilized world, at least, have to understand that we are dealing with the butcher, with the terrorists, which are striking Ukraine. Tonight they struck several peaceful cities in Dnipro. They've killed a young woman with her 2-year child. They've struck other cities. They struck Uman, which is almost 400 miles away from the battlefield. It's a,
You have video, Ivan?
yeah, it's a small regional city on interstate from Kiev to Odessa. Probably,
Right.
Sasha, you visited
I
it
know
or just
very well, of course.
passed it, and it's famous by the tomb of Jewish saint. Each
Mhm.
year, thousands of Hasids
Yes.
carry pilgrimage to Uman from the whole world, from Israel,
Right.
majority, and this tomb of Jewish saint is actually based in Uman.
So what is the message Putin trying to bomb city like Uman? What Putin's message to the world?
No messages. Just they are showing just they are terrorists. And
If there isn't, please say.
Yeah, let's watch the video, and after that we will continue discussing.
Thank you.
Сбиваю. Ебать, прилет. Еще.
Пізда, брат, нам ходу немає нахуй.
Але не думала, що таке може бути. А ракета попала в наш дом. Ми всі в крові, я не знаю. Всі стекла вибило. А тут спали діти. Добре, що ми всі живі. Просто ми всі в крові, ми всі. Боже, в нас немає ні вікон, нічого, я так злякалася. Суки, я вас ненавижу, кацапі, гребаних, ненавижу, Боже.
свою боль і більше. Але врешті я втім, як у мене в дім, я лишила його на людей, на котів, а пошила усіх, я не люблю котів. Хай люди такі суди за день, свої бетонні суди, я дерев, що ховатись, сохнути людям першу, другу сорту, а люди такі сотнями.
I have no words, really. Well, Jonathan, you must then explain the decision of Biden administration not to provide the needed weapons for Ukraine to deal resolutely with international terrorist state. Why?
Well, trying to explain it from the standpoint of the Biden administration, I really can't. The message the Russians are trying to send with that latest attack against an area distant from the actual battlefield, what they are trying to say essentially to the people of Ukraine is that no place in Ukraine is safe from us. By simply striking a random deep target. No place is safe. There is no sanctuary. Negotiate peace. That's a brutal message. It's an inappropriate message, but it is, in fact, the message that Russia is trying to send to Ukraine with that attack. It is an attack on the morale of the Ukrainian people. It is a psychological blow, much more than a military blow.
Jonathan, just a
yes.
very quick question. You mentioned that Russians are trying to force Ukrainians to negotiate. Have you heard from history of war history or any just basically human history and negotiations between somebody who has a gun and another one who doesn't have a gun? Have you ever heard about any negotiations in this respect? Because one who has a gun say, do this, this, and that. That's what negotiations between someone with a gun against somebody without a gun, right?
Pretty much. And in this case, the Ukrainians are armed, and they are very well able to hit back.
They're not armed.
Not
Not against
Russia.
country like Russia. Not against country like Russia. This is pathetic that they're not armed now. They can defend themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, I can see that. Now, their attack, which I thought is imminent, it doesn't appear to be so. There are maybe political reasons for that as well. And Russia is trying to help Ukrainians to come to certain decisions. The strike of yesterday, the best example to that. So if Ukraine would be armed adequately against Russia, trust me, they would get Russians out of Ukraine by that time. They would inflict the attacks on Russian cities, including, by the way, Moscow, because after all, Moscow, all there is to it, it's a Russian city. And the same thing as the damages are inflicted on Kyiv and many other Ukrainian cities. I don't see why Moscow has to be excluded. For what reason?
I repeat, Sasha, Jonathan, I want to repeat that when Al-Qaeda struck the United States on 11th of September, President Bush was not going to make any peaceful negotiations with Al-Qaeda and with Osama bin Laden. He just ordered and sent United Army to the Afghanistan. We don't ask to send United Army to Ukraine to protect. We just ask them to send us all required weapons and fighter jets and long-range missiles. And United States are helping Ukraine. Thanks for that, but obviously is not enough. And when we ask for fighter jets and White House Pentagon officials says that they are not sending fighter jets because of this is a political decisions, then I want to ask every citizen of the United States, please ask your senator who you were voting for, what the fuck is the political decision not to send fighter jets to Ukraine to protect ourselves? against
Okay.
terroristic organization, which is obviously Russia after such.
Ivan, let me just say, and Jonathan, please correct me if I'm wrong. So the political decision means that there are certain framework within sending or not to sending fighter jets, F-16, for example. If you send the jets, you achieve certain benefits, but there are drawbacks, and they could be significant. Now, if you don't send, then there are also huge drawbacks, including military drawbacks, which are quite, I would say, tangible versus the political intangible benefits or drawbacks. And so what is the motivation not to send? Okay, there were technical explanations that the Ukrainian pilots are not trained well enough, that there are shortage of the airfields from which they can fly, and lack of technical support, perhaps, or so on. How viable is this explanation? And if that's the case, why you are relying on political restrictions? Why don't you just say that, sorry, but technically speaking, it's just impossible because of these reasons that I just listed? Jonathan, what do you think?
I am at a loss to explain why the U.S. in particular is showing restraint at this point when it is clear that Russia is incapable of conquering Ukraine or extracting a political victory from Ukraine on the battlefield. They can't do it.
But they do distractions. They do a lot of distractions.
Again, if there may be some reluctance on the part of the U.S. political leadership to escalate even further, because they believe that there might be some creating a much wider conflict, and the fear of making it a true conflict between NATO and between NATO and Russia. And
yeah, but that's conflict Russia will clearly lose. We all know that.
Yeah.
Why to avoid something which will make you victorious and your enemy loser? Why would you avoid it?
Fear of escalation. That's the only thing I can think of. Just fear, some political fear on the part of the U.S., some portion or as a whole of the U.S. political leadership. They do not. They fear this. They fear escalation. Okay. So that's the only thing I can offer.
Because of escalation, there could be a few million people, 100 million people, perhaps, would die, especially if it's going thermonuclear or so on. Okay, understood. However, the alternative is to get the aggressor unpunished, ready to strike again in the next 2 years, maybe 6 months or whatever time is, and to live for another 100 years under the fear of actually upcoming thermonuclear attack. And you know what I was thinking more and more about, that this thermonuclear exchange is imminent. It's just too many warheads each country is possessing, and when it's there for so long, the longer it's there, the most likely it finally will be used. So if you take approach that the thermonuclear exchange is inevitable, it will be next 6 months, 6 years, maybe 4 years or 8 years, it's inevitable, it's there, it must happen. So do it now when you have a huge advantage and everything is now mobilized, and all your NATO forces are mobilized on the Russian border and everything is ready to move. What are you waiting? So Russia will become stronger in rebuild?
I have another question
Okay.
in terms of escalation, which when the situation is about Taiwan, or when the situation is about South Korea, United States directly say that they will be involved in this conflict, and they will strike and they will protect Taiwan from China, or they will strike to North Korea. And when President Biden says actually, and they will change the regime in North Korea if they will attack the South Korea. And so in these particular cases, White House and United States politicians and the Pentagon are not afraid of any escalation, and they're not afraid of direct conflict with other nuclear powers like China or North Korea. So why they're afraid in any escalation with Russia, with Putin, which army is not able to capture the small city of Bakhmut for more than 8 years, 8 months? What kind of escalation they're afraid, particularly in case with Russia, which they are not afraid in case with North Korea or with China?
Ivan, that's a very easy one. US fears much more confrontation with Russia than with China. I think US believes that with China, although China is getting stronger and stronger, but they can still, from military point of view, deal quite a substantial blow to China one way or another, and that's the end of story. Although even that is not so clear, because Russia, in many scenarios, will start fighting on China's side. And therefore, that will be quite unclear how US will deliver that blow to China, although it's quite possible. With Russia, is a different story. In fact, China today is much stronger than Russia. I would, if I were US, I would fear China much more than Russia, because Russia, the Ukrainian blew up the myth of the last 80-some years that Russia is a great superpower and it has so many warheads and its army is second to none and so on. That's been just destroyed. There is no more Russian army. There is no more Russian warheads. They will probably not even fly and will never explode. And nobody knows when last time they had maintenance of these. And that's one reason that Russians stopped inviting the US inspection of their nuclear warhead sites, so they don't want to even show what kind of warheads there are. I think maybe they all been a long time sold out and destroyed and don't even exist. So talking about all that, now it's the easiest time, because of this incredible the atrocities of what Russia does to Ukraine, declare Russia terrorist state, number one. Number two, 72 hours withdrew all their troops from Ukrainian territory, and not following that, destroy all the Russian troops on Ukrainian territory. Full stop, period, end of story.
Yeah.
U.S. political leadership is unwilling to think in such absolute terms. That's just my response. They will not respond. They are not interested in imposing what would be the equivalent of a Carthaginian peace on Russia. In effect, destroy it as a national entity, which is what escalation to nuclear and use of all armed forces against against Russia would entail, especially a combined effort by the U.S. with NATO.
So
they are unwilling to take that step.
Okay, Jonathan, but it's not very difficult to envision a situation where Russia will attack one of NATO's countries.
Oh yeah, and then there's Article 5, yeah.
Baltic republics. So this is a very bureaucratic way of thinking. Okay, here's Latvia. No, we'll destroy you. Or Ukraine. Okay, just go ahead, take it, whatever. Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense at all. At all.
But but that's
and the issue is that they can't take Ukraine, and why not to finish this conflict as soon as possible? It's possible by not even just by sending the United States or NATO troops to Ukraine. We have enough troops, we have enough power, we have enough volunteers to assist us. We just need fighter jets, we just need long-range missiles, and we will finish Russian troops immediately. We will punish them for striking Ukrainian houses. When we will be able to strike upon 300 kilometers or 500 kilometers deep into Russian territory, and we'll be able to strike Russian We will not strike their houses. United States weapons are precise weapons. They are not like just Russian weapons, which they shoot to power plant or strike the nearby residential apartments. Will strike Russian air bases, will strike their military objects and show that they will not be able to, without any counteroffense measures, strike Ukraine, and that will be stopped. They will have to get out from Ukraine on themselves. And that's all. As soon as we will get it, the war will be ended. So I ask our audience from the United States, just after our show, write or call your senator and ask why they are not given fighter jets and long-range missiles to Ukraine. What the fuck is the political decision not to give fighter jets and long-range missiles to Ukraine? And ask them to answer. That's the only small thing you can do to stop this war immediately.
Yes, I will agree with you. There is a bit of ambiguity on the current administration approach to the situation. On one hand, I've heard that they want to finish the war this year and definitely before presidential election in the United States. But this year would be preferable. Yet to provide Ukraine with necessary tools to do it, they wouldn't do it again for the political reasons. So this is kind of a schizophrenic approach. Okay, we want you to win this conflict. Not only that, we want to do it before a certain date. But the tools which you require to do this job, we are not going to give you. Jonathan, what kind of stuff is that? Is it a medical problem?
It's called not thinking through the implications of one's decisions, and because it's just difficult to explain. The current path leads to stalemate and to I'm still not persuaded that the Ukrainians are incapable of launching a major counteroffensive. It could be that they are feigning weakness in order to, or feigning a lack of a counteroffensive capability in order to exploit the best possible opportunity in the near to intermediate term. The limited counteroffensive actions that the Ukrainians have taken thus far I would compare to a series of feints or jabs by a skilled boxer. They are still looking for the proper opportunity. They do not want to wage a counteroffensive simply for the sake of waging a counteroffensive. They want to make their shot count. They want it to be decisive. So they are looking, my opinion is that the Ukrainian military leadership is simply probing, looking for the best timing and opportunity to launch a counteroffensive that will have a major effect on the situation in the Ukrainian war, and that would set the Ukrainians up for a decisive victory on the battlefield. And I'm not convinced that there will be no action against Crimea in the near to intermediate term. But my guess is that it's the timing. It's the timing and the strength of the offensive that is in place.
Actually, the latest what I heard is that Russians are taking out of Crimea all their weapons and equipment, and
that could be a tacit admission of imminent defeat if they stay there. So Crimea could fall to Ukrainian counteroffensive action without as much effort as was previously estimated. So that could well be the case.
Actually, if there will be attack on Crimea from a Kherson region and the Crimea bridge will be destroyed, there is no way for them to take their equipment out anywhere. There is no way to get
and they may be trying to get out ahead of that cutting of the supply line. They may simply be trying to cut their losses, which is a good sign for Ukraine, especially if they go ahead and follow that up with a decisive counteroffensive to cut off Crimea and it falls into Ukrainian hands. since the defenses themselves within within Crimea will have been weakened. So I'm not in the mood for despair yet. Certainly, simply because the actions of Russia in launching those missile attacks deep into Ukraine, again, as I said before, it's simply their desperate way of sending a message and saying no place in Ukraine is safe. Negotiate with us, or
I
else.
just, Jonathan, just a last question for today. We are moving into May. It's our last program in April. We are moving in May, and there will be this. I think latest I've seen that 98% of all promised weapons from the West, they are already in Ukraine, and 2% are almost there. Okay,
Mhm.
so Ukraine got their weapons, although without F-16 fighters, ATACMS. But with even ATACMS, it's a dicey question. Nobody said that they were delivered, but nobody said that they were not delivered. So we will see how the Ukrainian attack will progress, but we'll see about that. So now what I'm saying is that upcoming celebration of Russia on May 9th of their victory in Second World War, it's usually they have a big military parade or so on, and it's quite unclear if it's happened this year. On the other hand, okay, there are some movements like Emperor Sina wants to be peacemaker and so on. In my opinion, it's a noise, but however, it's there, right? Now, remember that when the war started, after first week or two, there were attempts, I think Turkey at that time, attempts to stop the war instantly and make a peace and stop that. And that was all derailed by the horrors of Bucha, right, Ivan? So if now
Yeah.
there are some attempts, and what I hear is that Russia wants peace and as soon as possible or so on, why Russia then repeating what they've done in Bucha today, essentially make a peaceful process, if there is any, I don't think so, any peace process way much more difficult, because Bucha was what derailed the first peace process in its way. Why are they doing that, Jonathan? What do you think? While saying that they really want peace as soon as possible.
Again, the Russians are deliberately sending an ambiguous message, and they're trying to keep the West off balance. At the meantime, they really have very few options as far as attaining any kind of form of meaningful political victory, other than terrorism. The fact that they are resorting to terrorist attacks is a tacit admission that their primary military means have failed. It was the resort, by the way, of the Germans, of the Nazis in the Battle of Britain, when the attacks against Fighter Command failed to break the Royal Air Force. They came close, but then when the British struck at Berlin and sent essentially a political message saying, Nazi Germany capital isn't safe, and Hitler, in rage, responded with a terror bombing of London, trying to break the will of the British population. Oh, good luck with that. And that did not work. So in a historical parallel, the fact that Putin is resorting to what the equivalent of terrorist attacks against deep civilian targets, which have no military value, no military significance, but they are trying to attack the will directly of the Ukrainian people and indirectly attack the will of its Western political allies, and in particular the U.S., and say we will be able to strike regardless. Now, yes, but in terms of military means to strike Russia, that will be a very important decision. I just can't. It's a question of, will the United States political leadership, in conjunction with NATO, say that in order to end this, we have to make Russia believe that its territory is not safe either. And that is an open question. A successful Ukrainian counteroffensive against Crimea may well give the West the courage, if you will, to again counterattack against Russia. So
Okay, we
I'm
just
saying
have a
watch and wait.
very short message that there is alarm and second wave of missiles coming to Ukraine. Now, my last question for today, Jonathan, to you. You know very well that West, NATO, United States, alarmed Putin about using tactical nuclear weapon and the consequences of doing so. However, if you really take the tactical nuclear weapon and the uh, real destruction power of it, forget about radiation. Radiation is not a big issue in tactical nuclear weapon at all. Now, the actual inflicted damages are sometimes would be even smaller that from Russian missile attack and air bombs and so on. So why there is a certain restrictions on Russian using tactical nuclear weapons, but no restriction whatsoever on Russians using their conventional forces like missiles, the air bombs, or so on against primarily peaceful civilian population of Ukraine.
It's an inconsistency. That's all I can say. It's an inconsistency which U.S. military and political leadership will have to address.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it could weaken the political will. It could, in theory, weaken the political will of the West to continue the conflict, continue supporting Ukraine to a decisive victory on the battlefield and a political victory as well. There has to be increased political courage and willingness to stick to its decisions.
All I can say, I wish that Russia would either by design or accidentally will attack one of NATO countries like Baltic states or Poland. Actually, Poland will destroy Russia by itself. It doesn't need any NATO forces. They will just go in just to take over Moscow in about probably 3-4 days. That will be the end of it. And with NATO, it will be done instantly or so on. That would quite alter the present situation with Ukraine. And I really wish that would happen. And then we'll find out what West really is worth. His deeds, his words, and everything else. Let's see, maybe we will witness just that. In that, I would like to thank you very much for today's program. Have a great weekend and see you. Bye-bye.